We are being joined by Michael Kay, who is an investigative journalist and a former RAF pilot, live from Västerås in Sweden. Good evening to you, Mikey. Now, we have heard the distressing final conversation between the flight controller and the pilot. What do you make of this exchange?
Alison, it's remarkable, actually, just how calm the handling pilot is, or whoever the pilot was who was making the call. Whenever there is an emergency of any kind, the mantra that we're all taught as pilots is to aviate, then navigate, and then communicate. And what that means is that you put the aircraft in a flying envelope that is under control. So, for example, if it's an engine failure, then you establish the glide. If it's something to do with the landing gear, then you make sure that you're flying the airplane, you're not going to stall the airplane while you're dealing with the problem. And then one of the crew should be then directing the aircraft through to the nearest possible diversion. In this case, it would be Karachi International. And then basically the third priority is to put out a call. You can hear the pilot or a member of the crew putting out a call here, and he's remarkably calm, because what he's effectively telling air traffic control is that he's lost both engines. This is an Airbus A320. It has two engines. He's basically saying that he's lost both his engines at relatively low level over an urban area, which was about 3 miles away from Karachi International on long finals on the approach. And that, to me, spells only one possible outcome, which is an absolute catastrophe. If you lose both engines in a double-engine jet and you're low level over a city, you have very few options of where to put that aeroplane. And so it's chilling listening to the pilot talking to air traffic control, just because he is so calm. And if he's lost both his engines and he's 3 miles out, there is no way whatsoever that aeroplane with a double engine failure is going to make the runway. You can hear the air traffic controller saying that he's clear land. I couldn't quite work out whether it was runway 25 or 29. Basically, that means that's effectively the westerly runway. If it's 25, that means 250, which is 250 degrees, which is a southwesterly heading. If it's 29, it's 290 degrees. That's effectively a northwesterly heading. And there's no way that aircraft was ever going to make the runway. So, to me, it's just chilling listening to how calm that pilot was. His options would have been zero. So if he's coming in over Karachi, he's going to have to just accept where the aircraft is going to put him. He basically will have had to establish a glide, which means effectively just gliding the aeroplane in like this. He has no control over where, or very limited control of where the aircraft is going to end up, because every time he turns, he'll have to put the nose down a little bit to maintain speed, a glide speed, which is optimal. And then effectively he's just putting it into the area ahead of him. And if there are tall story blocks with people in them that's ahead of him, or slightly right or slightly left of the nose, that's where the aircraft is going. And that is an absolute catastrophic scenario to be in.
Right. Mikey, the pilot was instructed to do a go-around. What exactly does this mean? And before the engine failure, did he have any option to do this? Because we also heard that there was trouble with the landing gear, as you've mentioned.
On the warning panel, that the aircraft has the gear down and the gear is locked. So when the gear comes down, the wheels come down, they get into a locked position, you get an indication of a green, and then it's safe to land. If they have a problem with the gear and the engines are okay, then the pilot still has time, as long as the crew have fuel. So if he had a problem with the gear, then he will have been instructed by air traffic control to go around off the approach, and then he will be put into some sort of orbit holding pattern where the crew can go through what's called the flight reference cards, which are a lot of information on cars. They'll have been through this problem a number of times in the simulator, so they'll be familiar with what to do and what to cycle through. And that will be at altitude. It'll be calm, controlled, measured. Air traffic control will make sure that there is no aircraft in the way. That is a certain case of emergency. If then the pilot is reporting that he's lost both engines, that is a completely different scenario, because the aircraft is going down. And the pilot then has limited options where to put the aircraft, because there is no thrust. So they're two very, very different emergencies. And a landing gear problem isn't necessary, but the information at the moment is very confusing. A landing gear problem versus a double engine failure problem. Or is very unlikely to be associated with a double engine failure. Engine failures don't happen very often on Airbus A320s. So it's very early. It's very new into the So this is the bit that's confusing me at the moment. Now, you already mentioned that the two black boxes, so one will be the flight data recorder, one will be the cockpit voice recorder into the inquiry. I'd be massively curious as to understand what's actually gone on here, because they will be both absolutely fundamental to the board of inquiry that will be established pretty quickly to understand what's happened in different emergencies.
Right, Mikey, and as you said, it seemed that air traffic control was instructing the pilot to land. It sounded like he was giving them an option. Why then, to your mind, would the plane have gone out of control if the pilot had that option?
So, no, what's happening there? What you're hearing, the conversation that you're hearing between the handling pilot or the non-handling pilot, whoever's on the radio, and air traffic, is the crew have basically put out a Mayday call. And as soon as you put out a Mayday call, there are two sort of calls that you can put out to indicate air traffic control you've got a problem. The first one is a pan, P-A-N, pan, and that indicates that the aircraft has a snag, but it's not a life-threatening snag. A Mayday is potentially a life-threatening situation. So as soon as a crew puts out a Mayday call to air traffic, it's air traffic's responsibility to effectively clear the circuit, clear the entire runway, and give that aircraft an immediate option to land on the runway. So what I think you were hearing, or what I can gather you were hearing, is you could basically hear the pilot saying, Mayday, 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 I've lost both engines, it's serious. And then the immediate response by the air traffic control is, you are cleared, immediate landing for runway, and I can't remember I couldn't make out whether it was runway 25 or runway 29. But what effectively air traffic control was doing was it was giving the clearance to the runway and basically letting the pilot have full access, full authority to do what he needed to do. So I think that was the conversation that was going on there. What air traffic control didn't realise, I don't think, or we're trying to ascertain, is the bit at the very end where the pilot said that he'd lost both engines at serious, effectively it's a double engine failure. Air traffic control will know that if that aircraft is 3 miles out, it's going to be at a certain altitude, which there's no way it's going to make the runway. But it is the air traffic controller's job to basically make the runway available if the pilot can make it. But in this situation, he was never going to.
Right. Mikey, thank you very much for helping us to analyse and unpack exactly what's gone on there. That is Mikey Kay, an investigative journalist and a retired RAF pilot, joining us for the latest on the aeroplane crash that has happened in Karachi. Now on to our next story.